Playing on a Budget is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, the best Magic the Gathering singles and sealed retailer on the internet, GatheringMagic.com, your #1 source for Magic the Gathering news and content, and RogueDeckBuilder.com, my personal channel filled with innovative and entertaining Magic the Gathering rogue brews. Hi there, it's Kevin with GatheringMagic.com here with this week's episode of Playing on a Budget. This week we're going to try a budget version of the ramp deck running Villainous Wealth. And this deck is going to have some expensive cards in it, so if you can't afford the more expensive pieces, you can definitely switch these out for more of just these Oblivion Sowers or the Void Winnowers, or you can even go with the common Eldrazi's that just cost the Bane of Belgata, and there's a few others that I think are worthwhile putting it in here. So usually this strategy runs a ton of Ugins and a lot of Ulamogs, but our budget version is going to be using their own cards against them with Villainous Wealth. It is very easy for us to generate 10 mana with a Villainous Wealth, and if you hit a Villainous Wealth for like 7, you're going to be able to exile the top 7 cards of their library and cast any number of non-land cards with converted mana cost 7 or less, or whatever you spend on X. So with this deck, you're going to get a ton of value out of Villainous Wealth, and hopefully you can kill your opponent with his own cards. So before we go over to the full deck tech, let's look at the budget brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, our official sponsors for Playing on a Budget. It's actually going to be more around $80 because the Cool Stuff is currently out of the Ugin. So you can see the Nissa's Renewal is about 50 cents, Painful Truce 50 cents, Sanctum's $1, Villainous Wealth 50 cents, and then the other rares in this deck are going to be a $3 Void Winnower, a $15 Ulamog, a $3 Rattleclaw Mystics, and 3 $7 Oblivion Sowers. Oblivion Sowers. So if we look into, I guess you have even more room to be on the $100 budget to actually add one more Ulamog, and you'd still with a $30 Ugin and another Ulamog. Yeah, so we do have room for another Ulamog. If we feel like we need it in the deck, I'll definitely put one more. I think it's just better than the Void Winnower, but just for the sake of having a diverse and a lower budget, we'll stick with the list that I have here. So yeah, a second Ulamog would be nice. I am running Sanctum of Ugins, even though they won't trigger that often. Basically, if you cast your Ugin, that means you'll go get a free Ulamog, or if you cast your Ulamog, you'll at least go get a Void Winnower. They'll be able to see. I'm not playing like multiple copies because they can become dead, and it's not that pertinent for this deck to do so. Our win condition is most likely going to be the Villainous Wealth. So for ramp, ideally this is what we call a 2-4-6 strategy. So you want to drop a 2-drop in Rattleclaw Mystic or Whisper of the Wilds into a 4-drop, which is going to be the Hedron Archive or Explosive Vegetation, into a 6-drop, which is going to be the Oblivion Sower or the Nissa's Renewal. And then these will actually ramp you into your next drop, being the Ugin or the Void Winnower, or just a big Villainous Wealth. So you can do this very quickly if you have the right hand. We thin out our deck a lot, and I thought I'd try some of these Blighted. So 2 Blighted Cataracts and 1 Blighted Fen. And what's really good about this deck is if you need to sack the Archives or the Cataracts, you can do so to draw more cards. But you're going to have a lot of card advantage by thinning out your deck. Now, we're not running any control. We're trying to rely on the Renewal to at least gain a 7 life to give us an extra turn. The Ugin can wipe an opposing player's board. Ulamog can take care of 2 permanents. And the Winnower can actually lock your opponent out completely of any even converted mana cost spells. And if we can just get off that quick Villainous Wealth, we can use their own cards against them to stabilize. Versus a red deck, we can end up using all of their burn spells against their own creatures. Against like an Abzan deck, their Abzan Charms can exile their Rhinos. And that's kind of the game plan. So I'm going to see if we need another Ulamog. If we do, we'll add one more and maybe take out a Sower if that's the case. I kind of do like it though in here as a 3 of. We could actually even take out a Whisper of the Wilds. We have the Nissa's Pilgrimage might be the other card we could take out because it is kind of awkward in this deck because it doesn't fit under the 2-4-6 strategy. But if we do miss on a Rattleclaw or it gets removed, we can still end up using the Pilgrimage. Pilgrimage in this deck doesn't a lot of times have the Spell Mastery, but even 2 forests for 1 is worthwhile. I think that would be the cut for another Ulamog. We'll wait and see. We'll play a few games and see if we need it. onto the sideboard, we have this. The left-hand column is the strategy against control. The right-hand column is the strategy against aggro. You have 2 Dispels, 2 Negates, 2 Painful Truths, and a Gaea's Revenge. The Dispels are really in here to make sure that your Villainous Wealth can go off, so you just hold up an extra blue. That's why we're running 2 islands in here for that scenario, so that you can actually have the Dispels and Villainous Wealth. I actually think that we should be running 1 more island rather than a black, but the reason why we're running 3 black sources in here is we do want to be able to maybe naturally even hit into one before, if that scenario happens to come into play, we can actually use the Rising -2/-2 to all creatures on time. Like right now, what we have to do is Explosive Vegetation into a swamp, because the Pilgrimage cannot grab a swamp, so it has to be a Vegetation into a swamp, and then this ends up being more like a turn 5, and that's the case. I think that I had 3 in here is because I initially had Languish, so I actually think we might want another blue source instead of a black source. We'll have to wait and see what the right number is, but so the reason why we're running this over Languish, though, is it doesn't kill our Offshoot. Our Offshoot is very, very powerful against aggro. We need it to stay out, and if we end up languishing off our own Offshoot, that ends up not being a good trade-off. So against aggro, I think that we do end up taking out the Rattleclaws and the Whisper of the Wilds, and then throwing in this package right here with Virulent Plagues. And Virulent Plague might not end up coming in, but I think we can easily find like a Dispel or a Negate versus some of those decks. Dispel is good against like a Tarka, so is Negate, and then what ends up happening is they keep in all their Wild Slashes and all of their fiery card, or whatever the Spell Mastery card is, what does 3 damage to a creature and then they don't have any targets for it. So that's our game plan. Plague is really good against Gideon. I initially had 2 in here, but I think that the one of, if we see it, is fine. It completely shuts down at least the token generation from Gideon. There's a lot of there is a lot of Bant token decks out right now, and Orzhov tokens. Both of those decks are starting to see a lot more play as the metagame shifted over to a 1-for-1 format. What I mean by that is using 1 spell to destroy 1 card, and it really made it so tokens were very, very well positioned. So either Gideon and Secure the Waste in white to generate tokens, or in red you have Hoarding Outburst and Dragon Fodder. But I think that if people start going back over to Languish and and cards like the Radiant Flames, then I think that tokens might take a backseat again for the 1-for-1 format. So this is also good against Gideon, -2/-2, all creatures. Unfortunately, Gideon usually does get value if you end up having to do that. But that's the basic deck tech. If we do run into any problems, we can adjust it as time goes on. But I think for around $80, $100, whatever you want to spend on this, I think it's a pretty decent deck in the metagame. It's going to do great versus the mid-range strategies. Anywho, this has been Kevin with GatheringMagic.com. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching Playing on a Budget. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Gathering Magic and check out our Playing on a Budget playlist, which contains every episode. Thanks again, and hope to see you soon.